It's kind of a common thing when people are struggling with any sort of behavior change, I would say. They will rationalize their decisions, right? So when kind of the going is getting tough for you, you notice that your energy's slipping, it may take a lot of work for you to prepare a meal. You're like, okay, I have to go out, and if I'm gonna go out, I might as well, right? And then you fall into that sort of logical trap of justifying or rationalizing sort of unhealthy eating, right? So I think this is a common thing that a lot of folks do, and I think part of it is because there's a little bit of an all or nothing mentality when it comes to, especially when it comes to diet. Moderation-based approaches, particularly when it comes to eating, is I think a superior approach, because the reality is like, look, you're probably going to indulge whether it's with food or the internet every once in a while. And so if you build that into the process, then it's not that you're never going to have a sandwich or a burger for the rest of your life. It's just, you're just trying to make it a little bit more of a conscious choice and not sort of an automatic or impulsive one. So number one, you've identified an issue of kind of a lack of energy. And I think part of that may be because some of the diets that you're trying are, quite frankly, extreme diets, right? I actually do not recommend a 100% plant-based or 100% animal-based diet for anyone, quite frankly, because both of those are actually non-ancestral. There's not a single civilization that I am aware of in the history of mankind that has sustained a 100% plant-based diet, because it's actually nutritionally deficient. You will get a vitamin B12 deficiency. And same thing, there's no cultures that have been 100% animal-based either. The issue that happens is, especially I would say with the more ketogenic kind of diets that are heavily meat-based, is people tend to develop electrolyte deficiencies on those diets. What happens when you cut your carbs is that your insulin also tends to decrease. And when that happens, it has almost like a diuretic effect. So you will essentially urinate a lot more on a ketogenic or low carb diet, especially at the beginning when your body's adapting to it. And so what happens, because you're urinating more frequently, is you are literally pissing out your electrolytes or your minerals, and the most common of which are sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And so when you do that, your energy levels drop, you feel fatigue, you don't feel very good. And that's a major reason why a lot of people quit a low carb or a ketogenic diet. So why kind of bust your own butt and try to stick on a diet that, quite frankly, is going to be impossible for you to do? So here's what I would recommend in terms of picking a diet. Is I always recommend to everyone that the best diet is the one that you're willing to do and able to sustain long term. You have to kind of like ask yourself deep down in the bottom of your heart, whenever you're picking a dietary plan, it's not just, can I do this for the next 8 to 12 weeks in order to have a beautiful summer bod because summer is coming up. You should be asking yourself, can I do this for the next 8 to 12 years? In fact, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? And would I be happy doing this diet for that long, right? What diet am I willing to do basically forever till the day that I die? And when you ask yourself that question, it really feels differently, doesn't it? Right? Where it's like, okay, we're not talking about 5 weeks, we're talking about 50 years. And so it almost, by process of elimination, eliminates a lot of these sort of extreme diets. I do not think red meat is unhealthy. I don't know why. It's unfortunately been propagated because of the evils of saturated fat, that red meat is unhealthy or it's cancerous. In fact, I always tell people there's not a single randomized control trial that I'm aware of, and please prove me wrong if someone wants to find it, that shows that red meat increases cancer risk. You don't have to give up eating kebab or eating steak. I do think the quality of the meats are important. If you can afford, obviously, like healthier, grass-fed, organic, that's all great. Even then, if you can't, I still think it's not unhealthy to eat red meat. So you don't have to give up eating red meat first and foremost. Yes, you can eat some chicken too. So you can have, your 2 skewers of some beautiful kebab, or it's basically filet mignon. And you can have that with salad or vegetables. For some people, it's not hard to cut out the rice altogether. If that's the case, I would go pure salad or vegetables with some delicious juicy meat. And that's super healthy in my opinion. If it's a little bit harder for you, you really want that rice, then yeah, I would get a half portion, which is a lot more reasonable than a giant bed of fluffy saffron infused rice, which, as delicious as it is, it's the quantity that I think is tough, especially when you're consuming it with that much meat. So you want to kind of watch eating really high fats with high carbs together. And unfortunately, a giant bed of fluffy rice with kebab is an example of that. So you want to kind of mitigate, I would say, the rice when you're ordering those kinds of dishes. Because when you're cutting out particularly sugars and refined carbohydrates, you're not going to get those blood sugar spikes and crashes that kind of make people go all over the place and makes them pretty wonky in terms of how they feel in their energy levels, right? The average American just thinks that after they eat, they should be getting sleepy, right? After lunch and dinner. It's not, in fact, the norm. It's because of our really, quite frankly, shitty diets that are very glycemic. They spike our blood sugar. We have a lot of insulin that's released basically right after that, which lowers our blood sugar. And so you get this spike and then this crash afterwards. When you eat a lot more of this unprocessed or minimally processed diet of whole foods, your blood sugar levels, although they do go a little bit up and down, you're not getting this crazy ups and downs as you do. And so your energy levels remain much more stable as well. The one thing I should add, though, is I would be careful about eating out too much. It doesn't mean that you can't do it forever. I certainly do go out and enjoy some good Persian food or whatever food, Mexican food, every once in a while. But the tough thing is about restaurants, and this is the thing that I think, unfortunately, a lot of people miss, is they cook the meats and a lot of the other foods in basically refined seed oils. So these are very common oils like canola oil, which really comes from a plant called rapeseed, which they thought was not very PC, so they had to rename it something sexier sounding, like canola oil. Peanut oil, soybean oil is actually the number one most commonly used oil in the United States. And so when I tweet half jokingly about deep soy on Twitter, I'm also half telling the truth in the sense that it's a highly processed oil and it's everywhere and we can't get away from it. The unfortunate thing is when you go and order at a restaurant, you have no idea what oil that they're using, right? So an example of this, by the way, is McDonald's. Certainly they sell a lot of unhealthy things, but the meat that they sell, if you can actually go there, and this is a great, by the way, life hack, food hack trick, is whenever you go to McDonald's, you can actually ask to order things off the a la carte menu. It's not literally on the menu, it's just on the a la carte menu, which means you can order by item. You can ask them, for instance, to order just the quarter pound patties from the a la carte menu. The meat is actually fresh, it's never frozen, and it's not cooked in any actually oils. It's cooked in its own fat. So literally the only 3 ingredients in a McDonald's quarter pound patty meat is beef, salt, and pepper. That's it. And so it's actually a great trip when you're traveling and you don't have access to cooking and you want to avoid those refined seed oils. Just order the a la carte, the quarter pound patties from the a la carte menu. If you're cooking at home, I recommend that you cook in animal fats. So ghee is great. You can also use lard, which is pig fat, tallow, which is beef fat, or duck fat, if you really want to get fancy. You can also use avocado oil. Avocado oil is not a seed oil. It's literally from the fruit, not the seed. And that has a smoke point of about 500 degrees. So that's a great oil. Olive oil, like real olive oil, is also really healthy, but I don't recommend it for cooking. I recommend it for drizzling on salads because it has a low smoke point. It's like butter. It burns around, I think, the low 300s. And basically, I really believe that people need to have emergency food around because there's going to be food emergencies. And what I mean by a food emergency is you're going to be hungry and you're not going to feel like cooking. And if you're in that battle, you're going to lose, right? Because in the moment, you're just going to do the impulsive thing and make bad choices. So instead of fighting your willpower, which is always going to be a tough thing, we basically got to get ahead of it. So if you have the ability to meal prep, I would say, great, that's probably the best and healthiest thing to do. So always basically have a little bit of leftovers or always have like 1 or 2 spare meals, around. If you don't have that, what I would suggest is buying essentially emergency food, right? So Trader Joe's is a great place for this. Literally, they have a lot of like pre-made stuff that you can either literally throw into one pan, one skillet, 5 to 15 minutes cooking, or quite frankly, you can even microwave, right? It's like pre-cooked, you just got to heat it up. And so if I don't want to necessarily go out and eat, I have backup, essentially emergency food. So that's the second tier. And then the third tier is what I call NutriFoods. You always have backup food. Even if you're literally traveling, you're on the road, you don't even have access to a kitchen. We have food that doesn't spike your blood sugar levels. All you need is a bottle and water, right? If you're interested, there's the company still exists. I sold the company, but they're still making it. It's called Actualize. You can go to goactualize.com and it literally sells ketogenic meal replacements. And the thing that I always say about it is, look, it's not better than real food. Real food is always going to be the healthiest, superior choice nutritionally. But the problem is, it's not a nutrition problem. It's a behavioral problem, right? And so you fight behavioral problems by making it easy to do the right thing. The default behavior should always be the easiest thing to do. And so in those moments of weakness or tiredness or whatever else is going on for you, it might not be a bad idea to have a few shakes, literally just like in your pantry, in your fridge, in your backpack, so that you always have a default or backup food that doesn't involve going out to a fast food restaurant. It's a meal prep as option, like first line of defense, second line of defense, some frozen entrees that is reasonably healthy. And then third line of defense, you can have sort of shakes, any or all of those that work for you. But my admonition to you is come up with a backup plan, have backup foods. And so that makes, going out to fast food restaurants the fourth line, right? So you gotta like fail all of these options before you decide, I'm gonna go out to a restaurant and eat like kind of a shitty thing.